Welcome to the Talk Like a Leader podcast, where we explore the mindset, skill set, and habit set of leadership communication. Using these tips, techniques, and tactics, you'll be able to talk like a leader to build better relationships and get more done. Your host is Guy Harris, who has more than 20 years of combined professional and military experience in consulting, coaching, and training in areas like team and interaction dynamics, communication strategies and tactics, as well as emotional intelligence. Take it away, Guy.
Hi, this is Guy Harris. Welcome to Talk Like a Leader. This week's episode is titled Use Affirmative Statements. This is an idea that basically comes from an observation about how people tend to read or perceive statements, either written or spoken. It's the idea that we often don't hear or read nots or negatives, not as in N-O-T, nots or negatives. And when we read a do not do this statement, it is incredibly easy, especially when we're in a hurry or under stress, to skip over the not and hear the negative statement as a positive. Let me tell you what I mean by a story. The first time I recall observing this situation goes back probably about 30 years. When I was working for a major oil company, I was communicating with our marketing department. I was a technical person, process product development role. I sent something to one of our marketing and sales directors answering a question he had asked about what we could or could not do in response to a customer question. And I remember writing a message back to him that basically said, this is what we can't do, or don't do this. And I don't remember the specifics of what I told him not to do. What I remember is that the message basically said what not to do rather than what to do. And then he promptly went and did exactly the thing I told him not to do. Now, as we talked about it later, he basically told me that he had read my message to tell him what to do, like his brain skipped over the not part of the sentence. And he did the thing I asked him not to do. Well, that was a one-off thing. And at the time, it was annoying and frustrating. And frankly, I was sort of judgmental of him for not reading the message carefully enough. And I went down this whole trail being annoyed with him. What I've noticed over the years, though, is he's not the only one. And it's often not because people don't read, although that's part of it. I mean, I guess you could argue that if people read carefully and read every single word, they'll pick up on that not in the middle of the sentence. And frankly, a lot of the time people don't. It's not all the time. It's just enough of the time that it's a problem. I've had a number of situations where I said, don't do this particular step as you're working on something. And that's exactly the thing they do. Or here's how I don't want us to respond. And that's exactly the response that is given. It just has shown up a number of times in the last 30 years, enough that I've noticed a pattern. And now that I'm a little older and understand communication processes and how much of the time we skim messages instead of read messages, how much of the time we hear selectively, I realize that it's not that these people that don't hear what I'm trying to say or read what I wrote are stupid. It's that they're human. And if I'm honest, I have done the same thing. I have read negative messages the wrong way, and my brain just skipped over the negative part of it for some reason that I actually can't explain. So what do you do to confront this? Well, I'll tell you an illustration of something that happened just today. In fact, my wife and I were working on something, and we were trying to place an order with a vendor, and they had asked a question about something that we were ordering, and it was like a two-option kind of thing. And we discussed it. My wife said, well, we don't want to do this. And the reply was back, well, thanks for asking. That is not what we want. What we would like is this. And so the point is this, that in trying to be clear, we basically included both what we don't want and what we do want. And what we don't want was in a direct answer to the question, because the way the question was phrased, there was really only the only good way to answer it was to say that the thing you ask is not what we want. What we chose to do in reply was to add the affirmative. We don't want this. What we do want is this other thing. So if you can practice including the affirmative statement, and based on how the question is asked to you or how the situation develops, maybe you don't get backed into a situation where you have to include the negative at all. In our case today, we kind of had to because it fit the flow of the conversation. The point I'd like to leave you with today is to remember to preferentially use affirmative statements and avoid the negative statements if you can at all. So try to replace negative statements with positive statements to the best of your ability. If you do have to use a negative statement in reply to an email, in response to a way a question is phrased in conversation, work on including the affirmative rather than stopping at the negative. Now, what I've noticed is that when you include the affirmative statement, the thing you do want, it improves clarity, it reduces frustration, makes it easier for everybody involved to know exactly what the expectation is. If you can practice and get skilled at, comfortable with, consistent with using affirmative statements, you can talk like a leader. This has been the Talk Like a Leader podcast. You can listen to this show every week wherever you get your podcast. If you haven't, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'm Guy Harris, and thanks for listening.